Hi again, everybody. I thought it would be appropriate to do a video on this topic, which is psychopathy, narcissism, astrology, and what psychopathy and narcissism isn't. Anyway, it's just a whole mixture of things. Sorry that you're staring at Ted Bundy's face, but there's a reason why I did that, and that is because looking at this man smiling at you like that, he doesn't look like an evil person, does he? Which is one of the main trademarks of a psychopath. And that's what Ted Bundy is. He is a psychopath, narcissist. Now, the reason why I want to make this video is I just wanted to explain what I know about it. I've been studying this for so many years now. There is a huge difference between somebody who is a psychopath, somebody who is angry all the time and rages and just anger articulates, somebody who is a narcissist, and somebody who's just a plain arsehole. There is a big difference between all of them, and lately it seems like all of those terms are just thrown together. So especially when it comes to hearing about people in their relationships, I keep hearing, in the astrology world especially, people accusing other people of being narcissistic psychopaths or just narcs or narcissistic people. Now, it's just not the case, because 1% of the population is narcissistic or has narcissistic personality disorder. 1% of the population is a psychopath. So, you know, the chances of everybody that you are going out with being a narcissist is very, very, very slim. And in saying that, not all narcissists and not all psychopaths kill people or are even really horrible. So it's very hard to spot them. You can't just put a blanket over everybody and say that they're a narcissist or a narcissistic psychopath. It's a very specific disorder, and when looking in the charts in astrology, it's especially important to know the difference between all of your disorders and whatnot, because you can't just chuck labels on things like that. If I put a label on people at the rate that I see other people doing that, I would be telling everybody that I do a reading for that their partner is a narcissist, and I would be so wrong it's not funny. So people really need to take that out of the equation unless they know the person is truly a narcissist. And that needs a doctor needs to tell you that. You need to be told you have narcissistic personality disorder. But even then, the true narcissist won't believe that that's true. Okay, moving forward, let's stop looking at Bundy's face for a minute. Oops. So this is the hair psychopathy list. There's 20 checklist points that you have to tick to be a psychopath. And you need to have a lot of them. You can't just have one or two. And they're very specific as well. You can't just apply them to everybody. So the first, these are the first set of factors. And I mean, it's so different. Like, the reason why you need to be wary with labeling with narcissism, because there's so many different types of narcissism and psychopathy and sociopathy as well. There's aggressive narcissism and community narcissism, and there's this, you know, in factor 2 here, which is just a socially deviant lifestyle. Then you've got your, like I said, just being an asshole and just being rage-fueled. You know, so again, that shows us why it's important to really know exactly what you're talking about before you start diagnosing people, and even people that you think is a psychopath. Okay, so glibness and superficial charm. Now, That's the sort of thing that we see. Ted Bundy, he's a perfect example of somebody with that smooth, charming, and verbally facile, very slick. Well, to some people, I thought he was repulsive actually, and I could see through his stuff, and I'm sure a lot of people could. But he thought he was really good. It's when you're charming and you never get tongue-tied. You know just the right thing to say, just at the right time. And astrologically, when I'm looking at an event chart and I'm looking at the perpetrator, if I see Libra on the 7th house cusp, I can start to think, okay, this person may have some superficial charm, because Libra is very much associated, and I've studied this for a fair few years, this list in comparison to astrology, and it does work, but I'm talking event charts, not natal charts. You cannot look at a natal chart and think that this applies. It can apply in natal charts in certain instances if they're triggered off by conjunctions of transits, and if there's a whole bunch of signs that are together. So if somebody had 8 planets in Libra on the ascendant, and then Mars and Pluto came along, I don't know, whatever, in Libra, and hit all of those planets, then you could go, okay, well, there's something, something might be going on with this dude by the natal chart, but you can't other than that. So that's glibness and superficial charm. Glibness is also, I think Charles Boyle from Brooklyn Nine-Nine said it best. If you can see Garfield saying it, it's glib. So there's another way of looking at it. I'm sure that's what he said. Yeah, Garfield is glib. Okay, I had to stop recording then because I had a fit of laughter about Garfield and Brooklyn Nine-Nine, which is just silly. Okay, so the next one on the list is a grandiose sense of self-worth, and that's just somebody with a grossly inflated view of themselves, their abilities, and what they can do. They can be very, very arrogant, opinionated, brag a lot, and truly, truly believe that their abilities are far beyond somebody else's. Now, in astrology, if Leo was on that 7th house cusp, I would start thinking grandiosity, because that's Leo's thing. No, that's not the one and only thing. Of course, you'd have to look at a whole bunch of other things, but that's Leo's territory, grandiosity and sense of self-worth. Now, if the ruling planet of an event chart of the 7th house, so the perpetrator, was in the 2nd house, which is the house of self-worth, then that would imply that even more. So we can apply that all throughout this, and that's how I've done it, and it works. Okay, pathological lying is quite easy to understand, but there's different forms of lying. It can be moderate or high, but it's somebody that's just really shrewd and clever, very good at lying. That it's just being deceitful and underhanded and manipulative is the next one on the list, but it's the same thing. It's being able to do and say whatever they want to get what they want. Okay, so cunning and manipulative is the same thing, using deception or deceit to get whatever they want. It's for personal gain. It's all about the self, which is the sun in astrology, by the way. So, yeah, it's all about what they want. What can I gain out of this? Because they have no empathy for other people. They don't really care about what other people want. So pathological lying and conning and manipulation is very much Piscean or Neptune or 12th house in nature. But it also is important to look at the axes between the 3rd and the 9th house, because that's our lower mind and our higher or our abstract mind. It's the way that our mind works. So we look to Neptune, we look to the 12th house, Pisces. So if Pisces was on that 7th house cusp, I would go, okay, well, this person's, well, A, perhaps on drugs or an alcoholic, an escapist, and B, is a pathological liar or is very, very manipulative. So that's how I would use that in a chart. Okay, lack of remorse or guilt is quite explanatory, but it's when they just don't care less about the pain that other people are feeling or the suffering. So psychopaths that do kill they really, really do not care or understand the pain that they're putting somebody through when they're killing them. They're extremely cold-hearted, and yeah, I mean, that's often shown by how they kill the person. So lack of remorse and guilt is hard to see in a chart, because that's something that's sort of a bit of an intangible one. But again, the 12th house is an area where I would start to look for that, because the 12th house is something that we have either, it's so subconscious, so behind our mind we can't access it, or it's not there. So it's very 12th house to me. So again, Neptunian and Piscean. Okay, moving along. Shallow effect. Now that means that the person that you're talking about has a very limited range of depth of any feelings at all. It's somebody that is really cold, even in spite of perhaps even open gregariousness or adventurousness. So it's a complete opposite of what they're actually like. There's actually a complete lack of emotion and a limited range of depth for one's feelings, but you wouldn't see that on the outside. And to me, that's actually very Sagittarian, Jupiter, and 9th house in the event chart. I'm going to have to say that all the way through, because I can't have anyone thinking that this is purely natal stuff. It's really not. So shallow effect is very Jupiterian. Chris Watts, he had shallow effect. He appeared to be the good family guy, and you know, he was fun and whatever on his little on the videos, but he had a coldness about him, and an emotional poverty, and a very limited range of depth of any feeling of any sort. Chris Watts is a perfect example of that. And in the event chart, for when Shannon came home, Jupiter was on the 7th house, so that fits, and it happens a lot. If you did watch that video, you'll note that I've seen Sagittarius on the 7th house cuspian event charts a lot. So when you hear me going on about all these, remember to listen out for Jupiter and Sagittarius on the 7th house and which one relates to what, because there's a lot that do. Okay, cowardice and lack of empathy is fairly self-explanatory. Just a cold, inconsiderate and tactless person, and somebody who has no empathy for others. You know, when we watch somebody, well, me especially, I can't speak for everyone. If you watch somebody getting hurt, it can sometimes make you feel physically ill. So the thought of killing somebody is so beyond you that it's, you know, you'd have to have no empathy to be able to do that. Empathy, again, is a hard thing to put in the chart, because it's a Neptunian thing, it's a Piscean thing. Well, it's a water thing, basically. Empathy is a very water-orientated thing. So, but again, 12th house, Neptune, Pisces more so, but Cancer as well, you know, and it, so you would think, well, hang on, if Cancer or Pisces is on the 7th house, wouldn't that person be very empathetic? Because they're natally, that's what they are. They're very empathetic. But that's what the difference is between astrological criminology and normal natal astrology, is that, well, and there's a lot of it in just astrology. It's a flipperoo. So even though the Piscean is nurturing and empathetic to the max, in an event chart, when we're looking for a psycho, if Pisces is on the 7th house cusp, most of the time that person doesn't have that. They are lacking in that. So as strange as that is, that's what happens. Failure to accept responsibility for own actions is just very easy to see, and you can't really attribute that to a sign because heaps of people do that. There's a few you can't put signs on. Many short-term marital relationships, so that's just saying basically that they can't maintain that depth of feeling for anybody for too long, so they just get married over and over. Criminal versatility is somebody that, well, is versatile in crime, who has committed crime before, jailbait, you know, that type of person. And make sure you understand that not everybody has to have every one of these things to be a psychopath. You do need all of them, but you're not going to have every single one of them. So you can't rule it out if you don't have one. Criminal versatility is also, it goes back to that the person was probably a juvenile delinquent as well, or somebody as a child or between sort of 13 and 18 had issues with the law. So that's that criminal versatility as well. So the next one is need for stimulation and a proneness to boredom. So that's somebody that just can't sit still, can't do the everyday things. You know, they find school difficult, just general life difficult, because they have this excessive need for excitement and thrill, and anything that's not thrilling to them or that produces the adrenaline rush is pure boredom. So this shows that some people, well, if they're like that, then they've got no discipline in carrying tasks through to completion because they get too bored. So it's somebody that can't finish a job because it's like, oh no, I'm sick of it now, I need to move on to the next thing. So overstimulation. And that is also why, and contributes to why they can't stay in relationships and quite often go through many different jobs as well, because they get really bored in their jobs. They can't hack it. So yeah, they certainly don't like to participate in anything dull or routine. And so the key word there is routine. So we have two signs really that cover this area, and that is Sagittarius and Jupiter being one, because the need for stimulation is an activity. Adrenaline, that adrenaline rush, is very Sagittarian. The proneness to boredom and the non-ability to stick to a routine thing like work and just general life is Virgo and the 6th house. So keep that in mind when looking at that point there. Now, a parasitic lifestyle, that is a person that intentionally manipulates somebody financially as well as in other ways, to depend on other people. So they take it a little step further than just emotionally. They actually become a parasite off other people as well, and with the inability to have any responsibilities of their own, they become a parasite on other people, and they become very exploitive and financially dependent on other people. So that's that parasitic lifestyle is very second house, 8th house axes stuff. So Taurus and Scorpio, more 8th house and Scorpio, because that's other people's money. So living off of other people's money and not providing for yourself, because your own sense of self-worth is so good and so fantastic that you don't have to do it. Let them do it. Which is Taurus, the second house. It's sort of opposite that, the 8th house. Okay, I better zip through them a bit. It's taking too long. Poor behavioural control is just somebody that can't control their, behaviour literally in front of you. Verbal abuse, a temper, extreme rage, just snaps back. Whoppo, really, really angry. Goes from being okay to being really psycho. I use that term very, very loosely, in just a few seconds. Now, remember, this has to go with everything. It's not just by itself. So you can't just go, oh no, my boyfriend's a psycho because he just snaps sometimes, because that's not the case. Promiscuous sexual behaviour. I don't know about that one. Yeah, maybe. So, well, what that represents is this. I think it is more superficial relationships and people that have affairs and numerous affairs, or an indiscriminate large amount of partners, or maintain several relationships at once, even to the point where it's just somebody that's a braggart about how much sex they have. So there's a deeper thing behind promiscuous sexual behaviour. It's in relation to all these things. But sexual behaviour is basically related to the 5th house in astrology, having sex and, excuse me, but I have to say how it is, the transference of sperm outwards is an 8th house thing and a Scorpion thing as well. So that's actual sex, but sexual behaviour and promiscuity is more a 5th house area. So if you're looking in the 5th house, that's... And interestingly, again, Chris Watts, I did a video about him before, he was promiscuous, and the ruler of his 7th house, the 7th house in the chart where Shannon came home, was Jupiter, and it was in the 5th house. So that's that promiscuity. Lack of realistic long-term goals, that's just somebody that has an inability or a persistent failure to develop and execute long-term plans and goals. They're aimless and have no direction. Now, I don't personally agree that applies to a lot of killers. I think what they need to really do is put this into maybe more than these 2 factor sections, and put them into more sections, because you have the people that can actually, that can have long-term goals and don't have a lack of realistic long-term goals and expectations. And I'll talk about that in a minute, but there's people that are psychopaths that don't necessarily kill people. So all of these don't apply to everyone, and I think they do need to perhaps update it a little bit. So yeah, long-term goals and realism is Saturn, Capricorn, but also Uranus and the 11th house as well, so and Aquarius. That's where we would look for that lack of realism and long-term goals. But like I said, I'm a bit iffy with that one. Impulsivity, that's just the lack of planning. Now, see, in a serial killer, you can have a premeditated killer, somebody that plans it so much that, you know, I mean, if you're watching this, you probably know about serial killers. They don't just do things on urges all the time. I mean, they have an alternate urge to kill, but they will spend a long time setting up this. You know, it's not always impulsive. There's a lot of people that are impulsive and that are disorganized. So this one should be impulsivity or / organization, you know, high organization skills, which then you'd start looking at Virgo. But around here, I can't really apply the astrology to it because it's just, I don't know, it's not as deep as we have over here. It's, like it says here, it's just socially deviant lifestyle behaviour. So impulsivity, irresponsibility, juvenile delinquency, I've talked about that, early behavioural problems. This one, revocation of conditional release, is somebody that's been let go of or been released from prison due to, you know, not appearing in prison or whatever, and probation or other conditional releases due to technical violations and stuff like that. So that's really specific. So we can't put that with astrology either. But I'll talk about that in the next section. Okay, so here's Ted Bundy's chart, just for an example. Now, it's an example of how we can't really look at the natal chart, but how some people will think they can, even with what I've just said. But it's still important to look at the transits, and if you want, I've done the videos on his victims and the transits and progressions, and they're really interesting, and they back up what I'm going to say. But the ascendant is how the world sees a person and how a person looks. And it's in Leo, and it's at 25 degrees Leo, no less, which is conjunct a fixed star called Regulus, and that is, it's really prominent in Trump's chart. It's somebody who thinks they are untouchable, but also someone who will just say what they think and think that they're going to win. All of those traits in that list, get the list back, he doesn't fit every single one of them because, as I said, he wasn't really, he was impulsive towards the end, but he planned his kills. Now, he had long-term goals to be a lawyer. I mean, he lacked the realistic long-term goals of being a lawyer because he wasn't good enough. So that's really the only element of realism that's not in this. In his mind, he wanted to be a lawyer, and that showed when he was on trial and he stood up for himself. But all the other things came through, and you could see them. You know, the glibness and the superficial charm. Holy moly, he had that for sure. But even though I said before that's a Libran thing, now flip back to Bundy. Libra, he only has Neptune in Libra, but he has Libra on the 3rd house cusp. The 3rd house is how we communicate with people. So we can apply that a little bit by saying, well, he can talk to people really well because he's a smooth criminal. And with that Leo, go back to the list again, he had that huge sense of self-worth. But he's got Saturn and Pluto in Leo and the ascendant, so there's some heavy stuff. And in his transits and progressions, I know that Leo was triggered off. So it's not just his natal chart. But yeah, he had a grandiose sense of self-worth. But you can't just apply that to every Leo, because that's not the truth. I myself am a Leo, and I certainly, absolutely don't have a grandiose sense of self-worth. In fact, mine is a little bit lower than it should be because I have Neptune in there, which makes it a little bit hazy. So that's why it depends so much on where every planet is in your chart. Okay. He has a bunch of Scorpio things. He's got the Sagittarian. So all the areas that I was covering, he's got in his chart. But still, this could just be anybody's chart. So reiterating, we can't think that this person's a psychopath or a narcissist just by looking at their charts. So here's my beef with the whole thing. There are people that are psychopaths, or have narcissistic personality disorder, that don't kill people at all. There are narcissists that we need in the world more than anybody, believe it or not. So I think personally the list needs to be altered, because this is quite old. And especially now that the whole world is going, oh my God, my boyfriend's a narcissist. So I'll move on to the next bit, which is really interesting. Okay, so here's perhaps the surprising revelation about all this. Many surgeons and very professional people that are really, really good at what they do, and politicians and lawyers, are in fact narcissistic people, and they have narcissistic personality disorder. Now you think about it, this surgeon has a knife in his hand and a person that's completely at his will. He can do anything he wants. He is God at that moment in time. He chooses to save her life. Without surgeons, we would be buggered. But they have to think they're good. They have to have an inflated sense of self-worth. They have to have a grandiose sense of self-worth, because if they didn't think that they were, really good at what they did and had a grossly inflated view of their own ability, then they probably wouldn't be as good as they are. And they always strive to get better and better and better, don't they, people like that? Now, they also have the same similar traits. You couldn't say superficial charm. There's no need for them to be superficially charming. I mean, unless they don't like people and they're just giving you a smile before surgery or something. There's absolutely probably a proneness to boredom, because they need to be doing something all the time, because what they do is extremely thrilling to them and they're saving lives. So, there's not a lack of empathy either. There's a lot of empathy. But then there's a point where you think, well, you'd have to cut off and lose the empathy a little, because if unfortunately you lost this patient, you would have to go home and have dinner and carry on a normal life with your family. So there's an area there that's a bit grey, and where that lack of empathy could be necessary for this man's brain in order for him to be able to do what he does best. And interestingly, actually, psychopathic narcissists that follow that list often think that what they do by killing people, that serial killers, is a job. So, if they'd have just thought about it a bit more or had a higher IQ, they probably could have been surgeons. So you might be wondering why Tom Cruise and Madonna are here. Well, Madonna is a self-confessed narcissist, and that makes sense. She's the best female singer in the world. Well, not my opinion, but, I imagine she's got tons and tons of awards and is probably the richest and best. Maybe Taylor Swift's better now, someone I don't really know. Boo to all them. I like the Foo Fighters and 21 Pilots personally. So yeah, she's apparently has some, poor behavioural controls and likes to do what she can do to get what she wants, because she's in the position where she's done everything, she can afford everything, so she would definitely have would get bored easily and wouldn't want to be bored. And can you imagine what you would have to do to try and get some thrills if you were Madonna? After you've done everything and everyone loves you, and it would be really hard. That's why a lot of celebrities turn to drugs to escape that, because there's no more adrenaline. There's nothing that makes them excited anymore. Madonna's probably different, and performing makes her excited and keeps her going. Tom Cruise, psycho. No, he's definitely got narcissistic tendencies. He hasn't killed people, I think. Scientology, I don't know. I don't think Scientologists kill people. No, sorry, insert here. All Scientologists do not kill people. But he, again, one of the highest paid actors in the world, and inflated ego, etc., etc., and doesn't kill people, I think. Okay, look, I can go on for hours, but maybe I should just leave it here. I just wanted to give you a rundown of what a narcissistic psychopath was. See ya. Well, I better finish it up and go back around in the full circle that I intended on doing. You're just looking at a brain scan here, because it's really important that everyone understands that the brain is so comprehensive and so important in dealing with these disorders, that astrology combined with MRIs and understanding how the brain works, and environmental factors or everything else about a person needs to be looked at before they can have some type of diagnosis of being a psychopath or a narcissistic psychopath or a narc or any of those things. Now, often in serial killers or killers that they have studied, they see that the prefrontal cortex is very different than other people's, and the amygdala, which is down around here, I think, is different as well from other people's. So their brains are actually different too. So the chemistry of the brain is different. So you have a whole load of factors involved in it. You have, you've got the brain, you've got I was just looking for something then. You've got the chart, the natal chart, but with the transits. You've got the environmental factors. You have my dogs that are about to start going off as well. Oops, let's just go back to the brain, it's easier. There are so many factors involved in it, and basically it's just wrong, and I would be remiss to not say that people should not throw the term narcissist around as much as they do. Like I said before, 1% of the population has it. Not every single one of your boyfriends or girlfriends or friends or parents have narcissistic personality disorder. You will know later in life, perhaps, if you've been treated as a victim of a narcissist. And I thought that would happen. Sorry about that. Narcissism isn't something that you see easily. It's usually, it's not even that often done in a relationship. It's more apparent to a child, in fact, and it develops over a long period of time. Or if it is in a relationship, it develops over a really long period of time. And you don't know that you're in a situation with a narcissistic person, because they're very, very good at masking the illness. Now, you can grow to accept that the person is just one of those types of people that likes to brag about things, or, you know, likes to show off and likes to say how good they are. But narcissism is far more than that. It's all of those components that I talked about before, along with the natal chart, along with the environment, along with a proper diagnosis and brain scan and a whole bunch of other things that you should have. Narcissism is a slow process, and you really don't know you are being taken for a ride until much later than a quick relationship can show you. Because the narcissistic person is a nice person. It's a person, like I said, those Libran qualities. It's a person that you want to talk to, a person that thinks they know everything, and you believe that they know everything because it's believable. So a narcissistic person also doesn't have to be a bad person. So by saying that the person you're with or the person you know is a narcissistic person, it's not even applying it to in the right context, because narcissists aren't all bad. Narcissistic psychopaths are killers, but not all narcissists are bad. We need narcissistic personalities in the world. Otherwise, the world wouldn't run. Or maybe on the other hand, if we didn't have, we wouldn't have psychopaths like Bundy going around killing people. So there's sides to everything, good and bad. It's the same as everything in life. Absolutely everything. So please, please, please understand, narcissism is something by itself. Narcissistic psychopathy is something by itself. Societal narcissism is something by itself. There's a whole range of things. And then, of course, there's simply someone that's just being an asshole. And a lot of the time, that's exactly what happens. And you don't have to attribute everything to mental illness or personality disorders when referring to angry or rage-fueled people. Okay, I hope you guys like that. I'll get rid of Bundy. Oh, and there's Gacy's face. Isn't that pleasant? Okay, thank you guys for watching. Again, there's Jim in the control room. I think this is Jimmy Fallon. I don't know what they're comparing here. I just needed a brain to show you. Maybe it's a bit of alcohol taking the brain away there. Poor old Jimmy Fallon. Anyway, I'll keep my opinions to myself. I didn't mean that. Sorry, Jimmy. Thank you guys for watching. I know this was a long one, but I really wanted to have a good old chat about that. I think it's really important that people understand the difference between an asshole and a narcissist and a psychopath. And especially when it comes to astrology, if we're going to look at stuff, we're going to intertwine it into our studies like I do, it is imperative to arm yourself with as much information as you can. Research, research, research. Okay, take care guys, and thank you for watching. And also, please subscribe. I just need a few hundred more subscribers to hit 1,000. And then I really think the channel might take off. So hit that subscribe button. It's there in the brain. Hit the bell, which is down there somewhere. Just subscribe. I think my face will turn up just here. So click on my face there. It's really easy. Just subscribe. Okay. See ya. Bye. Take care.